When my younger brother Daniel called me at 2:17 in the morning, I knew something was wrong. Daniel was the kind of person who would rather deal with a problem alone than wake someone up in the middle of the night. So when I saw his name on my phone screen, my stomach immediately tightened. Hi viewer, before we continue, please do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, thank you. I answered half asleep, Dan, what's wrong? For a few seconds there was only silence on the line. Then I heard his voice, shaky and confused. Michael, I think something is wrong with Mom. That woke me up instantly. What do you mean wrong? She doesn't recognize me. I sat up straight in bed. What? I went to check on her before going to sleep, and she looked at me like I was a stranger. She asked me who I was. My heart started racing. Our mother had always been sharp. Even at 62, she remembered birthdays, phone numbers, and things that happened 20 years ago. The idea of her suddenly not recognizing her own son made no sense. Did you call a doctor? I asked. I tried, but she keeps insisting she's fine. She even told me I should leave her house. I checked the time again. Okay, I said. I'm coming over. Daniel lived with our mother in the family house after Dad passed away. I had moved to an apartment about 30 minutes away for work, but that night I made the drive in 15. When I walked into the house, Daniel was sitting at the kitchen table looking exhausted. She's in her room, he whispered. What exactly happened? I don't know, he said. Yesterday, she was completely normal. We had dinner, watched TV, everything. Then tonight, it's like she woke up as a different person. I walked slowly down the hallway toward Mom's bedroom. The door was slightly open. When I pushed it gently, she was sitting on the bed reading a book under the lamp. For a moment, everything looked normal. Mom, I said softly. She looked up and smiled politely. Yes. Not Michael. Not son. Just yes. It felt like someone poured cold water down my spine. Mom, it's me, I said. She tilted her head slightly, studying my face. I'm sorry, she said calmly. Do I know you? My chest tightened. Mom, I'm Michael, your son. She looked genuinely confused. I don't have a son named Michael, she said gently. Behind me, Daniel let out a frustrated sigh. See, he said, this is what I've been dealing with. Mom closed her book slowly. Both of you need to leave, she said. I don't know why you're pretending to be my children, but this isn't funny. Daniel ran his hands through his hair. This is insane. But something about the situation didn't feel right to me. Not because she didn't recognize us, because of how calm she was. People who suddenly lose memory usually show confusion, fear, frustration. But Mom looked completely relaxed, almost prepared. Mom, I said carefully, what year is it? 2026, she answered immediately. Who is the president? She answered that too, without hesitation. Her memory of the world seemed perfectly fine. Except for us. Daniel paced across the room. We need to take her to the hospital. But Mom suddenly stood up, her voice firm. No hospitals. You don't have a choice, Daniel said. Yes, I do, she replied sharply. Then she said something that made both of us freeze. If you don't leave my house, I'll call the police. The room went completely silent. Daniel stared at her like she had just slapped him. Mom, I've lived here for 3 years. She crossed her arms. Not that I remember. I pulled Daniel aside into the hallway. This doesn't make sense, I whispered. What do you mean it doesn't make sense? He snapped. She doesn't know who we are. I know, but think about it. She remembers everything else perfectly. Daniel frowned. So how does someone forget only 2 people? We both looked back toward her bedroom. Mom had already gone back to sitting on the bed, calmly reading her book, like nothing unusual had happened. That Night Daniel slept on the couch, while I stayed awake in the kitchen, trying to make sense of everything. At around 4 a.m., I got up to get some water. As I passed the hallway, I noticed Mom's bedroom door was slightly open again. I heard something inside. Whispering. My heart started pounding. Slowly, I stepped closer. She was on the phone. Her voice was quiet, but I could hear enough. "Yes, they're confused," she whispered. Pause. "No, they don't suspect anything yet." Another pause. My stomach twisted. "Suspect what?" Then she said the sentence that made my blood run cold. "I told you this plan would work. If they think I've lost my memory, they won't question anything." I stood frozen in the hallway. Every hair on my arm stood up. Lost memory? Plan. I leaned closer to the door. "Just give it a few more days," she continued softly. "Once the papers are signed, it won't matter if they remember." Papers? What papers? At that moment the floor creaked under my foot. The whispering stopped instantly. "Hello," Mom said into the phone. Then the call ended. The bedroom door opened slowly. She looked straight at me, and for just 1 second, the confusion in her eyes was gone. Instead, she looked at me with a sharp, calculating expression. Then suddenly the blank look returned. "Oh," she said softly. "Are you still here?" I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the wall, while Daniel snored quietly on the couch, completely unaware of what I had heard. Mom was pretending. I was sure of it. The way her voice changed on the phone. The way she suddenly looked alert when she thought no one was listening. None of it matched someone suffering from memory loss. But the real question was why? Why would our own mother pretend not to recognize us? And what papers was she talking about? Around 8 in the morning, Mom walked into the kitchen like everything was normal. She poured herself coffee, glanced at me, and smiled politely. "Good morning," she said, like we were strangers sharing a breakfast table. Daniel woke up soon after. "All right," he said tiredly. "Today we're taking you to the hospital." Mom sighed. "I told you yesterday, I'm perfectly fine." "You don't remember your own kids," Daniel snapped. She shrugged. "That doesn't mean I'm sick. It means you're mistaken." I watched the two of them argue, but my mind was focused on something else. The phone call, the papers. After breakfast, Mom said she needed to meet someone about house maintenance. Then she left the house. The moment her car disappeared down the street, I grabbed my jacket. "I'm going out," I told Daniel. "Where?" "To get answers." I followed Mom's car from a distance until she pulled into the parking lot of a small office building downtown. She walked inside. I waited a few minutes before going in. The building directory listed several offices, accountants, insurance agents, and a law firm on the second floor. My chest tightened. Law firm. I walked upstairs slowly and stopped near the hallway. Through the partially open door of one office, I could see Mom sitting across from a lawyer. I stepped closer quietly until I could hear them. "Once my sons sign the documents," the lawyer said, "the house will legally transfer to you entirely." My heart skipped a beat. "House. Our family house." Mom nodded. "They'll sign," she said confidently. "They already think I have dementia." The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "And after the transfer?" Mom smiled slightly. "After that, it won't matter what they think." My stomach dropped. The house had belonged to Dad before he died. According to his will, it was supposed to belong to all three of us. Mom, Daniel, and me. But if we unknowingly signed something giving up our rights, she could sell it. Or worse. At that moment something clicked in my head. 6 months earlier, Mom had started dating a man named Richard, a charming guy who suddenly appeared after Dad passed away. Daniel never trusted him, and suddenly it all made sense. I pulled out my phone and took pictures through the door as proof. Later that evening I returned home, before Mom did. Daniel was sitting in the living room. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. "Sit down," I replied, and then I told him everything. The phone call, the lawyer, the house transfer. By the time I finished speaking, Daniel looked furious. "She's trying to trick us into signing away the house." "Yes. For that guy she's dating?" "Looks that way." Daniel stood up and started pacing. "Well, she picked the wrong sons. That night we prepared our own plan. 2 days later, Mom called us into the living room. "I spoke to a lawyer," she said gently. "Since I'm having some memory issues, he suggested we organize the house ownership to avoid future confusion." She placed documents on the table. Daniel and I exchanged a quick glance. "Just like we expected. These papers just confirm that the house stays under my name for management purposes," she continued sweetly. "All you need to do is sign." I picked up the documents slowly, but instead of signing, I turned to the last page and slid another paper across the table. Mom frowned. "What's that?" "A document from our lawyer," I said calmly. Her expression changed instantly. Daniel leaned forward. "It also includes copies of your meeting with that lawyer downtown," he added, "and the photos of you planning this." The room went completely silent. For the first time since this started, Mom's confused expression disappeared completely. She looked at us coldly. "So," she said quietly, "you figured it out." I nodded slowly. "You pretended to forget us so we wouldn't question signing away our share of Dad's house." Her lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then Daniel said something that hung in the air like thunder. "You didn't forget your sons, Mom. You just tried to erase us." Daniel's words hung in the air like a storm that had finally broken. Mom didn't deny it. She didn't even look ashamed at first. Instead, she leaned back in her chair and folded her arms like someone who had simply been caught playing a risky game. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then she let out a slow breath. "You don't understand," she said quietly. Daniel laughed bitterly. "Oh, we understand perfectly. You tried to trick us into signing away our share of Dad's house." Mom shook her head slowly. "You think it's that simple?" I stared at her, waiting for the explanation that could somehow make all of this make sense. "It was Richard's idea," she finally admitted. Daniel scoffed. "Of course it was." She looked down at the table, her fingers tapping nervously now. "He told me that if the house stayed divided between the three of us, it would be difficult to sell later if something happened to me. He said the cleanest solution was to transfer it fully into my name." "And the fake dementia?" I asked. Her eyes flickered toward me. "He said if I acted like I was having memory problems, you two would be more willing to sign documents to help manage things." Daniel shook his head slowly, disbelief written all over his face. "So you decided the best way to solve that problem was to pretend your own sons didn't exist?" Mom's voice cracked slightly. "I didn't think it would go this far." "But it did," I said quietly. Silence filled the room again. For the first time since we confronted her, Mom's confident mask started to crumble. The woman sitting in front of us suddenly looked much older than she had a week ago. "I was scared," she admitted softly. "After your father died, everything felt uncertain. Richard made it sound like this was just paperwork, like it would protect me." Daniel laughed again, but this time there was more pain than anger in it. "Protect you from what?" "Your own children." Mom didn't answer. That evening, Daniel and I made it clear that the house would remain exactly the way Dad had intended it in his will. No transfers, no secret documents. Nothing would change. Mom didn't argue. A few days later, we discovered that Richard had quietly left town. Apparently, when he realized the plan had fallen apart, he disappeared without even saying goodbye. We never heard from him again. For a while, things in the house were tense. Conversations were short. Meals were quiet. Trust, once broken, doesn't magically repair itself overnight. But slowly, things began to settle. Mom apologized more than once, though the words always sounded heavy with guilt. Whether we fully forgave her or not, time started smoothing the sharp edges of what happened. Still, one thing became clear to both Daniel and me. The scariest betrayal isn't always from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the people you trust the most, and sometimes the truth hides behind the most convincing act. So let me ask you something. If you were in our position, what would you have done? Would you forgive your own mother after something like this? Or would that trust be gone forever? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoy stories full of shocking twists and real human drama, like this one, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. Trust me, the next one might be even more unbelievable.